O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him? For by him were all things created that are in heaven and in earth, visible and invisible. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Therefore you are my witness, saith the Lord, that I am God.
Shalom. Hello again. Well, we're back with our Evidence of God series, and we'll be talking again with Gerald Schroeder with his theory of the 15 billion years of creation and the 6 days of creation being the same period of time. Some other Israeli scientists, Fred Herron, the American science writer. And tonight we're going to discuss time dilation. This is one of the most fascinating parts of this whole subject. We live in an expanding universe, and as we're going to hear, time dilates and appears to be different depending on your perspective of it. On to Jerusalem. Well, Gerald, in each of these programs, we're taking a segment and having you explain the fascinating theory where the 6 days become 15 billion years. They are the same thing in your view because of relativity. And you drew a chart on the board last time. It's still there. The Bible, 6 days, looking from the beginning, telescopes out to 15 billion years over there.
Just exactly as the universe has stretched out, as space stretched out, time stretched out. We have the misperception on the Earth, because we are so small amount of space and the universe that we see, that time is the same everywhere. But the fact, the reality is, and it took an Einstein to discover it, and that's the excitement of in the 1900s and the 1990s to talk about this, that time varies from place to place in the universe. And this is not a theory any longer, that a minute on the moon goes faster than a minute on the Earth. The ticks of a clock go faster. Oranges, in theory, ripen faster. Time goes slower on the sun. It's just stretched out. The beats of a heart would go slower if you could stand the heat of the sun. Those aren't theories, those are proven facts. It's actually been measured in airplanes where clocks, not simple clocks like these, but special atomic clocks that can measure within a billionth of a second. 4 clocks in the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. had tracked perfectly to within a billionth of a second for 5 years. 2 of those clocks were taken on airplanes and flown. In other words, their environment was changed. Instead of being here on Earth, they were up in a plane. Yes. No special planes, Boeing 747s, 707s, the normal jetliners. When they came back, the time was different. The clocks that had tracked perfectly for all those years, the clocks in the plane were slow. Not because they malfunction, but because at high speeds, time just goes slower. And they were traveling at a high speed relative to the clocks on earthbound clocks. Time varies. You know, Zola, it's interesting because many people have a problem with this concept of varying time, as do I. But no one has a problem with how much you weigh. You get up on a scale in the morning, step on the scale 150 pounds. Zoom off to the moon.
Boy, I'd love to see that from morning, 150 pounds. But go ahead.
Step on the scale on the moon. Yeah. Do you weigh 150 pounds? No, 25 pounds only. Not because you did aerobics the whole, oh boy, really? No, because everyone knows that gravity affects the weight of your body. The same size, you haven't lost any size. You measure yourself, no difference. What's going on here? Gravity affects the weight of the mass of your body. Gravity does the exact same thing to the flow of time, but so subtly that you can't feel it. You go to a water slide, whoop, and suddenly you don't weigh anything as you slide down. And your body remembers, gee, you know, there's something going on with how I feel or I weigh. That's where your stomach comes up like this when you go whoop, down a water slide. But your mind can't do that for time, because time takes tremendous cosmic differences from a speck to a universe. That's what we showed in the last show. Change your perspective of a dot, and it becomes a square. Change the perspective of a square. Pull back from a square.
Okay.
And it becomes a dot. Is it still a square? Yeah. but we see it as a dot. The same as the 15 billion years and the 6 days. The Bible said, as we said last week, there's evening and morning, day one,
Yes.
Yom Echad.
Yes.
By the second day, it was already second relative to the first. Day one is absolute. There was no other time. We know there's other days. So you could say, well, why didn't the Bible say a first day? That's because we know there are other days. On day one, there were no other days. The Bible is looking forward. And just look what this means. As the universe gets bigger and stretches out, the perception of time is equally stretched in exactly 1-to-1 proportion. So as the universe expands out, every time the universe doubles in size, the perception of time is halved. Well, clearly, it can double in size much more rapidly when the universe is small than when it's big.
Yes.
Because to go from here to here takes a lot more time than to go from here to here.
Yes.
And that idea of a spiraling out of the duration of time is mirrored throughout the universe. Here's half of a Nautilus seashell. Modern, from
Oh.
Cape Town. Beautiful.
Beautiful, yes.
See the swirls?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same doubling. Each swirl is a given factor. It could be a double, a triple, whatever, but each swirl is a given number bigger than the previous swirl. That's a modern Nautilus seashell. But let's look back at something a lot older. Try 270 million years older.
My goodness.
Now, remember, 6 days are 24-hour days. That would put this back somewhere about the beginning of day 6.
Yes.
Or the end of day 5. An ammonite from Regis in the southern part of England. See the swirls? I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but each swirl is a given factor bigger. It's the same as the Nautilus seashell, just separated by a day, or is it 270 million years?
And in one of your books is a picture of galaxies and
Pictures from the science of God, I have it because it's so extraordinary.
that same curve repeats even
Yeah,
in
in fact, these are photographs of these things, the Nautilus seashell, the ammonite,
yeah.
the seeds on a sunflower, the stars in a galaxy.
But Gerald, that galaxy is so enormous compared to a sunflower, compared to a...
Yeah, from sunflowers to galaxies, the most common relationship in the world is this, what's called in mathematical jargon, the exponential relationship. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, doubling, doubling, doubling. The swirls. And it
Each curve is just twice the size of the one
exactly.
before.
And
Okay.
that number shows up exactly in the duration of the days of Genesis. And that's what's so extraordinary. Remember, and we have to keep emphasizing this because I can tell you, as a scientist active in Bible study, I get it from both sides. You know, it's not just the scientists that want to kick me out of the room. The Bible people want to kick me out of here, I mean, as we can tell from some. But what's so exciting is so much of the correspondence that's come in from the other two programs we had have been so positive. I mean, it's just exciting to see that suddenly I think we've stumbled onto something. So here we're looking at the days, okay? The books of days, Genesis, the 6 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At day 6, this calendar ends. Why? Because God creates the soul of Adam, and mankind is created. I always write Adam and Eve together because Adam and Eve were together, okay? That the soul is created. So this calendar that we're talking about, the Bible calendar, the 6-day calendar, as we said last week, is 1 unit of time, and that's why time is described. There was evening and morning, evening and morning. After Adam and Eve, that description is never used. Adam and Eve live 130 years, the parents of Seth. Seth lives 105, father of Enosh. So from Adam and Eve forward, the calendar sees our time. Why? Because the soul of mankind is on the earth, and the Bible is linked, and we are linked with God, perfecting the world. So the duration of the time, from the Bible's point of view, looking forward in time from the beginning, duration, all right, here, duration. The duration of each day. My penmanship is not the best, but the Bible looks forward in time, okay? Bible looks forward in time, and we want to see how long each day lasts. Well, from the Bible's point of view, looking forward in time, as we said many times, day 1 lasts how long? 24 hours, right?
Yes.
The Bible says day. It means day. It doesn't mean ona, tkufa, moad, Hebrew words for epochs, periods of time.
Yeah.
The Torah, the Bible says there was evening and morning, day one. And those days are 24 hours each. Not as if, not make-believe,
Yeah.
not maybe by some make-believe watch. The same watch you buy in a store, 24 hours.
Okay.
But from the Earth's point of view, we don't have, I think I'm changing colors here. Yeah, get back to, oh, it doesn't. From the Earth's point of view, looking back in time, because we're in history, we don't have the option of going back. We can do the calculations now, and these calculations allow us to discover this phenomenal relationship. And it has nothing to do with me, Zola. These numbers come right out of the physics textbooks. I have nothing to do with it. Day number 1 comes out to last 8 billion years.
Okay.
That's an 8 with 9 zeros after it.
And of course, it's 24 hours.
In 24 hours.
Yes.
In 24 hours, looking forward from the creation, there was evening and morning, day 1. We see 8 billion years looking back. Day number 2, well, wait, each day's half the period, right?
Yes.
So day number 2 is 4 billion
Yeah.
years. Day number 3 is 2. Any guesses what day number 1 will be? Day number 4?
1 billion.
1 billion. Then
Half a billion?
half a billion and a quarter of a billion.
Yeah.
Billions of years. I write out the word billion here so people that
And if you add all those together, they are going to come out to your...
You got it exactly. You add them together. We add them together, and if we want to see the start of each day, the start of each day before in the years as years before what? Before Adam.
Okay.
So how would I do that? Adam and Eve. I'll just add up the duration. So 6 days lasted, day number 6 lasted a quarter of a billion years. So it started a quarter of a billion years ago.
Okay.
I mean, I could add on the 6,000 years. We're talking billions, it's the 6,000. Then there's 6,000 years. Remember, there's about 6,000 years from
Since then,
Adam
yeah.
till today.
But your total of the durations of the days...
A quarter, then I add on the half here because it's cumulative. 3/4 of a billion, 1 3/4 of a billion, 3 3/4, that's when the day started.
Yes.
Day number 2 would start 4 and 3 is 7 3/4. Day number 1 would start
15 3/4
well,
billion.
my
And that's
gracious.
exactly what the scientists say.
The Bible's getting smarter every day. I can't figure it out, Zola. Or maybe we're getting smarter every day.
Gerald, that's wonderful, and I realize you did it very quickly. This chart and all the information you've given is available in your book, The Science of God, which I understand is a bestseller now.
Yeah, thank
it's
God.
in all
I say
the
thank
bookstores.
God.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
and how. Get the book of The Science of God, folks, if you want to understand this very thoroughly. And I'm glad you came to this point, because in the next program, we're going to start talking about what happened on each of those days.
Each of those 24-hour days.
Each of those 24-hour days.
Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast.
One of the most fascinating parts of Gerald Schroeder's theory is the idea that time is not constant in this universe. It runs at different speeds depending on where your perspective is, where you are in an expanding universe. You know, it's hard to imagine, but we're used to it with dimensional objects. If I'm standing on a golf course looking at the flag way down at the end of the green, I see a little tiny flag in my eye. It seems to get small because it's at a distance. We take that for granted. Why should it get small? When I walk up to it, it's taller than I am. Well, we live with it every day, so we accept that. Well, time does the same thing. At a great distance, time dilates. The shell that Gerald showed us and the whole galaxy spiraling out shows the expansion, like the expansion of time. Ken talked with an Israeli scientist about the role of God in all of this expanding universe.
I was doing my master thesis in a laboratory in Germany, and we had a guest scientist which was coming from Israel. And I've been before, one year before in Israel for vacation, and I liked it very much, the country. And so I asked the scientist if there is a chance to work in Israel or doing a PhD in Israel, and he said he has an open position for me, and so on the spot there was something arranged, and that's how I came to Israel, to the Weizmann Institute.
Well, what is it that you do here exactly?
What we do is something very fascinating. We are growing diamonds, or we produce diamonds, and there's a new technology which is available since maybe 15 or 20 years, and you can grow very thin diamond films and all kind of material and all kind of substrates, and coat almost everything with a very thin diamond layer.
You say growing diamonds, and in your way you're creating diamonds, are you not?
Yeah, that's right.
Is this not duplicating in some way what only God can do?
It's not duplicate because you are growing all kinds of crystal in laboratories and chemical institutions, and so we just grow diamond crystal. They are much more valuable and much more special than anything else. If you have a rock salt crystal, nobody talks about it, but if you grow diamonds, so that's a very special topic.
There are those who would say that God's creation, and maybe even what's happening here, the ultimate result is because just randomly by chaos all came together, all these carbons and the things that you deal with. Is that possible?
It's not possible in a sense. Just if you look on a diamond crystal, how beautifully it's shaped. I'm always amazed when I'm sitting in the electron microscope and I see this beautifully shaped crystal growing up and showing all kind of symmetry and different shapes, and it's very hard for me as a scientist to imagine that all this is just there by accident, and all this structure which is within a carbon atom which is making the structure of a diamond crystal, that this is just there because there was some accidental events happening maybe a couple of millions years ago.
Do you see the fact that there was some architect behind the whole thing?
I think the whole complexity, how you have it in nature and all the laws which are determining it, is something which really speaks of a highly intelligent creator which must be behind this. Just imagine if you would have a clump of dead material and you put it somewhere in the desert or out there in the universe, it will never arrange itself to a highly complicated system like a human body, for example, is, or like just a diamond crystal, which is where each atom has its own place and behaves in a very special manner. So I think there must be an intelligent force behind it which is putting this information in nature and giving the characteristic to nature, what you see today in the nature.
What about evolution?
I have problems with this because if you look at the human being, there are some characteristics which the human beings have which you just can't explain by an evolutionary or mutational process, how the evolutionists claim it. Just the fact that you can sit down in the evening and drink a glass of French red wine and enjoy Tchaikovsky music and read a Dostoevsky book, there's no sense whatsoever for a human being to develop this to become better hunters or to survive better in the environment. I think it's something which God puts in the human being, and maybe something of the part which we read in the beginning of the Bible, that he created himself as his image or according to his image, that we can enjoy the nature and enjoy also have fellowship with God and with other people.
Is there something special for you as a scientist living here in the Holy Land?
Maybe not so much as a scientist, but as a person who believes in God and believes in the Creator of heaven and earth. I think the Jewish people, that they are the people of God, and the fact that there is a state of Israel now here is a proof, if you wanted, that there is a God which is taking care of a people which was scattered 2,000 years in all kinds of countries all over the world, and he's picking them up and taking them back in their country where they are living now. On the other hand, from the science, it's interesting to see that if you have all the Nobel Prizes, 30% of the people in physics and chemistry which has the Nobel Prize are Jewish peoples, and it's very amazing if you think about it, that it's just a very tiny part of the world population, and they inhabit a large number of the scientific prizes. So,
well, you have Dr. Einstein, Dr. Weizmann. Why do you think it is?
in one way, it's I think, of course, because they are the people of God, how the Bible says it, or they are the chosen people. On the other hand, I think the Jewish nature there and the Jewish education, there's something which constantly motivates yourself to learn somebody and to teach your children and to explain your children the surrounding the nature or the things concerning God. And I think that's something which is very special maybe to the Jewish people, that they really are into learning and studying much more than maybe other peoples are. And so these two factors maybe, that they are really into studying and learning, and a special gifting from God is the combination which gives the result what we see.
When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him?
So scientific men everywhere are finding God, investigating God. We have Fred Herron with us, who is a commentator on science, a writer of science. And tell me a little about your ministry. You talk to scientists all the time, huh?
Right, and in our ministry we try to help equip Christians to know how to talk to their unbelieving friends and try to find common ground with them, the way Jesus did when he talked to farmers about seeds and harvests, and what Paul did when he talked to the people on Mars Hill and he quoted from their own Greek philosophers. And if we really want to follow their examples, we really want to find common ground, get to the places where they're at. And that's what Daystar does, our ministry. It tries to find ways. Our strategy is to do evangelism by getting into the places where unbelievers get their information, to get into their bookstores with our book, Show Me God, and to get into their magazine racks with our magazine, Cosmic Pursuit.
Cosmic Pursuit.
Right. Instead of a trivial pursuit, we're talking about a cosmic pursuit.
Yes.
Try to get people thinking about life's big questions. And we try to equip believers to do the same thing with something like this, our little pamphlet on leading questions, to get people to be led towards the bigger issues rather than being always concerned about paying your bill in the junk mail. And we get so caught up in the little trivial pursuits that if we can get people thinking about the big questions. My wife was just telling me, it wasn't until she was 17 she heard the gospel and someone took some time to explain some things. She first started really thinking. Before that she was just kind of going through the motions. And I think that's the way a lot of our friends and our skeptics are. They hear this, they take biology in their sophomore year in college, in high school, and they say, well, that explains that. When I was out on the street, though, on Michigan Avenue in Chicago, asking businessmen, or in Berkeley, on the campus there, stopping students on the sidewalk and saying, well, how do you think the universe got here? They'd always say, well, the Big Bang. And I'd say, well, what do you think caused the Big Bang? And they'd go, oh, I never thought of that, They never really thought that through before. This really is a huge effect, this universe. It demands a huge cause of some sort. And that's where cosmology, again, provides common ground to get people thinking about where do we come from, and then what kind of a God, what kind of a first cause would this be?
Well, are scientists harder to witness to, you think, or easier than laymen? Do they get sort of set in their scientific ways?
Well, I think to the degree that scientists have been given all these answers that are just, this is it, this explains everything, they are tougher to reach in some ways. But in the kind of things we've been talking about when it comes to the fact that there really is evidence that has persuaded them of a creation event, and not only that, of a finely tuned creation event, that all of creation is dependent upon all these laws and constants in nature being precisely fine-tuned for our benefit, that should get them to think. But they, like anyone else, they need us to draw their attention to what that means. They maybe haven't thought about that before because the professors they respect so much don't talk about that. Indeed, it isn't part of science. And so if we can help them see the application of this science, knowledge of of creation as pointing to a creator, and then our personal accountability to that creator, of course, that's our goal, Daystar, and that should be the goal of every believer.
Sure. Well, these fellows, though, I mean, the people on our program, yourself, you talk in scientific terms. You fellows have white coats and labs and so forth. You believe in God. There was not any difficulty with you, was there? I mean, what I'm saying, I guess, is there's no contradiction between being a scientist and being a believer.
But we were educated to think that there is. And for me, I had to understand through being a skeptic, the principles of healthy skepticism actually led me to be skeptical about my skepticism. And I began to see that all this evidence that was coming to me from the people I would interview as a science writer, people like Robert Jastrow, who talked about a curiously theological result to come out of science, people like NASA's George Smoot in his 1992 great discovery, what he talked about as the fingerprints of the Maker. And when I talked to perhaps the greatest astronomer of our age, he's called the old man of astronomy, Alan Sandage, and he said, we can't understand the universe in any clear way without the supernatural. That gave me time to have to stop and think, and I thought we could understand the universe clearly without the supernatural. I thought that's what science was supposed to do, and that's what science was best at, is discovering natural explanations for everything, except for maybe why people buy tickets to see Donny Osmond concerts, but there have to be some mysteries in the universe.
There's a mystery. But when cosmologists get together, they are studying origins. Isn't that what cosmology is?
Right.
The beginning.
Right. It should be distinguished from cosmetology. One, the origin of the
Makeup.
universe, the other, the origin of pimples.
You said that when they were putting her makeup on.
Right.
Okay, so, and your specialty is cosmology, would you say?
That's right. We have a series of books, and the first one deals with, it's all the questions that skeptics typically raise that are stumbling blocks for their belief. And we're trying to find ways to turn those stumbling blocks into stepping stones toward faith. And the first one has to do with the biggest issue: how did everything get here? The origin of the universe. And our further on in our series, we're dealing with the origin of life, and finally the origin of the Bible. What's the uniqueness there? What's the evidence from fulfilled prophecies that you are so good at dealing with? We want to deal with those same great evidences that are there for all of us as believers, to point people to find common ground first, and then show how, once we've got their interest, how these facts, these evidences, point clearly toward a biblical creator and not toward a Star Wars type force who is one with the universe. That's the one thing he can't be. If there was a creation event, he must be outside of the universe.
Yes, and speaking of that, you know, God who lives outside of time, and I refer to Psalm 90, for 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past. And 2 Peter 3:8 in the New Testament says, unto the Lord a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. Both scriptures imply that God lives completely outside of time, is independent from the stuff we live in, from the time, from the gravity, from the air, the whole universe, and therefore can be the maker of the Big Bang, etc. And on each program, we're going to present Professor Schroeder and Fred Haran and other interesting scientists from Israel on the subject of evidence of God. Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.